Before we use any of this gear, we got to make sure that the home we're going to photograph is in good shape and it's actually photo ready. And the way we do that is by providing our client with a prep guide. And this is going to tell them some of the things that we ask the homeowner to do. It's all just a bit of good communication between us and our client, and then with our client to the actual homeowner. That said, let's just jump into the gear. I want to show you that you really don't need a ton of gear or a huge investment to get started in this business. Basically, we need a tripod, a camera, and some lights. That's pretty much the simple formula to do real estate photography. I mean, we're not talking about HDR and blending exposures here. We're talking about actually lighting the rooms. Let's start with the camera body. For real estate, doesn't matter what kind of body you're using. You can use an SLR, you can use a mirrorless camera. There's a number of options out there. It doesn't have to be the most fancy camera on the market. I'm shooting with the 5D Mark IV, which is Canon's most current flagship full frame outside of their sports and wildlife camera. A Rebel will work, or one of the cheaper Nikon sort of consumer cameras will work, but you do need to have a wide angle lens. So I'm shooting with the Canon 17-40. That gets me the ability to shoot pretty much any room, from a powder room all the way up to a master bedroom and even exteriors. Something in that range on a full frame, 16-40 or 16-35. And on a crop sensor body, you want something a little bit wider, something that's a little closer to 10 millimeters on the wide end of the lens. And then there's the 10-20 or the 10-22. So camera body, not super important, but definitely you do need a wide angle lens. Outside of that, the only other lens that I usually use on a real estate shoot is a standard zoom lens. This is the Canon 24-105. It allows me to get across the street when I shoot exteriors, so I can kind of zoom in on the home and compress things a little bit. And I think that it just fills the frame better and it gives me more options. I can shoot quite close to the home at 24 mils. And the reason that we use zoom lenses and we're not using primes or tilt shifts, I'm going to talk about that in a moment, is because we want to move quick and we don't want to be swapping out lenses. That's just taking up time. And we only have an hour to 90 minutes on site, so there's really no replacement for an ultra wide angle zoom lens for shooting real estate. We got to move quick. 17-40 is my go-to for 99% of the work, and then I do have this zoom lens as well, the 24-105, for shooting exteriors, but I don't use this inside at all. So I will take a quick second just to address the tilt shift lens. In my day-to-day work for design and the kind of stuff I'm doing now, I use this all the time. Probably maybe 90% of the shots I do are with this lens. Now, the reason we're not using it for real estate is that it's just not wide enough when we're shooting a small powder room or a small bedroom. And again, we don't want to be swapping out lenses. And also, this is a manual focus lens. It's got movements in it. It tilts, it shifts. It's really not the best choice when we're trying to move quickly on a shoot. So I'm going to actually not even bother packing this for the shoot, but I did want to talk about it briefly. Let's go ahead and throw our zoom lens, our medium range zoom, and our wide angle zoom and our body in the bag. So next I want to talk about the tripod. In my opinion, the tripod is probably more important than the actual camera and lens. No one wants to spend money on a tripod. There's a million options out there for an $80 or $100 or a $200 tripod. I can tell you from experience that those things last 6 months to a year and then they're gone, you gotta replace it. So definitely you wanna spend a little bit of money up front and get a good tripod. Don't get one of those flimsy travel tripods, and make sure you get one that goes high enough in case you wanna use it for exteriors and just get a higher vantage point. So something in the 6 to 8 foot range, something that goes pretty high is probably a good bet. And you also want to make sure you get a geared head. It gives us very fine movements so we can make sure that we get the composition we're after without the camera moving around too much. This one that I'm using is an Enduro AT413. It's an aluminum tripod. This one goes to about 7 feet. It's really heavy, it's really robust. I've had this for about 4 years. It's never let me down. It's not the most expensive tripod out there. This total investment, you're looking right around $600, which sounds like a lot, but it's sort of a buy once, cry once kind of thing. This should last you more than 4 or 5 or 10 years if you treat it right. But spend a little bit of money, get something sturdy. And I'm just gonna talk a little bit more about the actual head. This one has twist locks on it. So there's twist locks or there's lever locks. I prefer the twist locks personally. I just find it's a little bit quicker. And I'm just gonna extend this down and talk a little bit more about the head and about the adjustable center column. So we're moving pretty quickly with real estate, and when we go from a bedroom where we have a certain camera height into the kitchen where we might be a little bit higher, we don't want to be twisting those leg locks and having to adjust things too much. So having an adjustable center column that can rise and fall Gives us some really quick adjustments if we want to get a higher vantage point or a lower vantage point. Also with the geared head, we have knobs on here that give us the ability to rough in our composition. It puts it in sort of a free mode, and then once we get it close, we can actually fine tune it with these knobs. There's also a bubble level up on top so we can make sure that our verticals are straight up and down. And for architecture and design and real estate, this thing is really indispensable. This full setup is about 600 bucks. So it sounds like a lot of money, but it's really one of the most important things, especially because we're gonna be combining multiple frames and we can't have the camera moving. We want everything to stay nice and stable so that the frames all line up when we bring them into post. Let me just collapse this down and we'll get this in the bag. So I'd say that the tripod's actually probably, one of the most important things. So spend some money there. So next, let's talk about our lights. And this is my speed light bag. I've got 8 of these guys in here, and these come with me on every shoot. I just make sure that I have a few extras in there in case one falls off a door and smashes, or if I forgot to charge a battery, it just gives me a little bit of a backup plan. So the flashes that I'm using are a mixture of these Neewer TT850s, and then there's a bunch of different rebrands for these out there from Godox and Flashpoint. The key is that this is a dumb speed light. It doesn't talk to the camera at all. There's no kind of metering built into it. It basically just puts out light. That's all it does. The nice thing about these speed lights over some of the other models is that they have a lithium battery pack in them. So this battery pack is, they say, good for about 600 full power flashes. We're never at full power for a full shoot. So what I can usually do is charge these on a Monday morning and they will last me most of the week. I might have to charge sort of towards the end of the week. You'll notice that this one's on a little foot. So this guy can balance on the top of door frames. I can balance it on a mantle. I can put it on a table. It gives me a number of options, and it's triggered by using a little sensor in the front of this window here that will see other flashes going off. Those other flashes are triggered using radio triggers. Basically, it's a signal that comes from the camera and tells these guys to flash. It's pretty simple. These are super old. You can tell this one's actually all packing taped up. This was the first set of triggers I ever bought. I think I bought these in 2011. And these are the Yongnuo RF602s. Again, they're a stupid trigger. They don't talk to the camera at all. They're not receiving any information other than to make this flash fire. So we don't want the camera talking to the flashes at all. We want to make all the decisions. The way that I attach these to my little tripods here, I'm going to show you in a moment, is this slides in. It's just a hot shoe, and then we lock it down, and then this is actually a video tripod. This is a super lightweight. I mean, I would never put a camera on top of this thing. It's not very high quality. It's pretty flimsy. I think they're about 20 or 30 bucks. We're just putting our speed light on top of it. And we've twisted our speed light into this trigger. And then when we get on site, it's as easy as just popping that right into the top of the tripod, and we're almost set and ready to go. You'll notice that on this one handle here, I have these little eye hooks, or these little eye bolts. And we're gonna show you that when we get out in the field. I slide an umbrella right through there. That allows me to quickly and easily add a modifier. Again, for real estate, we're not bringing soft boxes. We wanna try to be bouncing light whenever possible, but sometimes we do need to use an umbrella to fire some light through. Now that we have our light actually up on the stand, we've got it attached to our radio trigger. The next thing we need to do is just put our actual transmitter into the hot shoe of the camera. Now this slides into the camera, and every time the camera fires, it just tells this guy to go off. So I can actually demonstrate that here. Let me just turn the power down, and you'll see that as I press this, the flash goes off. So that's the camera just telling this flash to go off. In the field, usually what I do is I have 2 flashes up on these stands, 2 flashes on the little feet, and then I also have 1 flash on the stick here that I'm going to talk about in a moment. In addition to that, I need a way to trigger my camera. I do a lot of mobile lighting, so I'm not ever at the camera actually pressing that shutter. I use the exact same set of triggers that I use for my lights. This is the RF602. Again, these are super old. I've had these things forever. They're all taped up because I've dropped them a million times, but they're really reliable. They don't misfire, and I can really count on these. The only difference is that I have this cable, and this cable is specific to my brand of camera, and it's made by Yongnuo. I've got a bunch of backups in my bag here because these things sometimes do short out, and it's so important to my workflow that if one goes down, I have to have a backup. So this is the LS02C3. So that is for my actual camera. If you're using a Nikon or a Sony, you might have to look up what model number is applicable to your camera. So this goes into our camera, and as I press this button, it's gonna now tell our shutter to fire. And because our shutter is firing, it's telling, this other trigger is telling our flash to go off. So I cannot work without this. I need a way to fire the camera without having to be right next to it. In terms of modifiers, I don't use a whole lot other than an umbrella. We don't want to be setting up soft boxes and other kind of crazy modifiers. We want to move quickly, and we can get a good quality of light by shooting through an umbrella. This is a 43-inch Westcott satin umbrella. It's nothing fancy. They're 20 or 30 bucks online, and I carry 2 of these in my bag all the time. The only other modifier I carry, and it's not really even a modifier, but it sort of goes along with this, is a pack of gels. These little gels are just tiny pieces of plastic that have been cut that I put over the front of the flash, and it actually just changes the color of the light that's coming out. I find that my umbrellas give the light a bit of a cooler bluish tone, so I'll use a half CTO or a quarter CTO, that stands for color temperature orange, just to warm up that light a little bit. But in terms of modifiers, that's the only thing I bring are the gels and the umbrella. Let me pack some of this stuff out of the way, and we'll talk about the last piece of gear that we need to discuss. These guys all fit in here. Everything fits into one bag. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is this guy here. This is just a cheap monopod. I think this thing's 20, 30 bucks. Again, not a huge investment to get into this. This extends to about 7 feet. And it has a radio trigger on the end, just like our other flashes. So when that remote transmitter is talking, it's gonna talk to this as well. What I do is I put a light on top of this monopod, and it allows me to be completely mobile with my lighting. Again, I've got a way to trigger my camera now. I can move all over the room and light in different ways. So I can actually stand outside of a room and put this light actually right in and trigger the camera, and I can light the room without having to actually walk in. So when I do my compositing work and I'm combining frames, I'm not having to Photoshop myself out of the scene. Oftentimes it's just a little bit of this that can be seen on the top of the frame. Another thing that being mobile and having this on a stick allows me to do is I can control the quality of the light, whether the light is hard or soft. So the closer that I hold it to the surface I'm bouncing off, the harder the light's gonna be. And again, if I hold it a little further down, it creates a softer quality of light, and I can try to bounce it off a wall behind me, and I can try a whole bunch of different things to get the quality of the light I'm looking for without ever actually having to be in the room. I can usually be outside of the scene. So I think that's all that we need to talk about in terms of gear. As you can tell, it's not a ton of stuff. A handful of speed lights, a camera, a monopod, and some of those little cheap light stands, and a good tripod. Remember to get a good tripod with a geared head if you can. So let's get all this stuff packed away, and we'll get over to the house and do our walkthrough.